بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, I welcome you back to our 13th lesson on the Akhlaq Adudiya by the great Imam Abdul Rahman bin Ahmad bin Abdul Ghaffar al-Iji rahimahullah ta'ala wa nafa'ana bihi wa bi'ulumihi fi ad-darain insha'Allah ta'ala. We are currently in the book in the section on the branches of al-hikmah. And al-hikmah, as we know, is wisdom, and wisdom being defined by the ulama of akhlaq, the ulama of ethics, as perfection in knowledge and action, al-kamal al-ilmi wal-amali. But what we need to realize is that before a person reaches the virtue or attains the virtue of wisdom, is that there are a number of necessary conditions. And this is what we are up to now in the book. And if you recall, the first precondition is safa al-dhihn, clarity of mind. The second one is jawdatul fahm, good understanding. And the third is quick-wittedness or al-dhaka. And just to summarize, because we've mentioned this in previous lessons, safa al-dhihn is an aptitude in someone's intellect. So someone's intellect is ready and is able to extract, or we can say think in the right way without confusion. So we can say the intellect of this particular person has gone through a process of tarbiyah, a process of nurturing, a process of exercise, such that they can reach particular conclusions or the desired conclusion, which is truth, without confusion. And that virtue, right? That virtue is, we can see, is the virtue which represents a potentiality of the intellect to do that. The second one we know is good understanding, and this is, let me read the translation. Good understanding is translated as correct movement from the necessitating cause to the consequence. So this virtue is not speaking about the potentiality of the intellect to reach desired results in the right way, but now is actually speaking about actuality, right? Remember, we have potentiality and then we have actuality. So the intellect right now is actually correctly moving, right, from the necessitating cause to the consequence, from the malzoom to the lazim, right? What are simple examples of these? We'll use examples from mathematics, right? For example, when someone thinks about 5 plus 5, immediately what happens is that their intellect then moves to the number 10. Right? This is what we call correct movement from the necessitating cause to the consequence. Right? So the intellect is correctly moving from a simple sum of arithmetic, 5 plus 5, and then it's moving to 10. Then the third precondition is quick-wittedness. Not only that is there correct movement of the intellect from the necessitating cause to the consequence, but the third is that this occurs quickly, right? Al-dhaka, which is quick-wittedness, namely the quick striking of conclusions, right? So not only is there correct movement, but rather there is quick movement which is correct, right? So if we think about it as three preconditions to wisdom, we have the absence of confusion, right? So we have the soul is free of confusion, and we spoke about where confusion comes from. Confusion comes from an excess of eating, an excess of drinking, right? So that's from the desire of shahwa, from the shahwa aspect of our intellects. And then we also have confusion that comes from a an increase in particular passions, one example being anger, which can cloud our intellect. So that's the first precondition. And then we mentioned the second precondition, which is that in the absence of confusion, right? In the absence of confusion, the intellect is able to make the correct movements from what is from the necessitating cause to the consequence. So it's about correct movement. And the third precondition is not only is the movement of the intellect correct, but it is also quick. Right? It is also quick. Now, remember, I just wanted to remind you about whenever we're speaking about akhlaq, whenever we're speaking about virtues, we're speaking about habits. And what do we mean by a habit in this context? We mean that the person has the habit within themselves to be able to do these actions. And here we're speaking about actions of the mind, to do these actions with ease, without much effort. Right? So someone has clarity of mind, and that's a habit. Someone has clarity of mind, and that's how they are normally. It's not a state where sometimes they have a clarity of mind, sometimes they don't. Right? When we speak about the virtue of clarity of mind, this person lives life in a particular way, such that they have habits, and these habits create within them this virtue of clarity of mind. And likewise, once again, when we speak about good understanding, when we speak about someone's intellect making the right movements, not only in terms of mathematics, it could be in all sorts of different intellectual subjects of the intellect. And once again, whenever we speak about knowledge as well, we don't speak only about intellectual knowledge, we also speak about practical knowledge, decisions that need to be made in terms of reaching solutions about problems in real life as well. So there's, as we know, we've spoken about this before, intellectual, speculative knowledge, as well as practical knowledge. Both are part of wisdom. So we're speaking about good understanding, where this is a habit in the person, such that this is what naturally comes to them without much effort. And thirdly, once again, quick-wittedness. Not only is it correct movement, but it is correct as well as quick. And this is a habit. Like the person is like this normally. Now, another aspect which I haven't spoken about in previous lessons with regards to the preconditions of wisdom is that whenever we speak about virtues, there are also vices, right? We spoke about, for example, when we spoke about wisdom as a virtue, we had slyness as a vice of excess, and we had stupidity as a vice of deficiency. Likewise, the preconditions to wisdom as virtues also have their corresponding vices. They themselves have vices of excess and vices of deficiency as well. So now let's read a little bit from one of the commentaries of this text, in which the Imam Tashkupurizada, one of the great Ottoman ulama who wrote a commentary on this text, he speaks about the vices of these different preconditions to wisdom. So he says, Bismillah. قال المصنف رحمه الله واعلم أن صفاء الذهن لما كان من الفضائل وقد ثبت أن لكل فضيلة طرفان. So he says, know that since صفاء الذهن, clarity of mind, is a virtue, and that we have established that every virtue has two corresponding vices. And he's going to begin speaking about the vice of deficiency, of clarity of mind. So he says here, فَطَرَفُ تَفْرِيطِهِ الظُّلْمَةُ الْحَادِثَةِ فِي النَّفْسِ إِمَّا بِسَبَبِ ما حصل في جبلية من القصور في استنباط النتائج أو لتعوده بذلك. So he says here, okay, What is the vice of deficiency for clarity of mind? It is a darkness. It is a darkness in one's soul, which occurs. What are ways that it can occur? It can occur through, as someone is simply that way, that they were created that way, or it could also be such that they themselves habituated themselves into that darkness in their soul. So once again, when let's step a little bit back. When we speak about a darkness in the soul, in which someone has been created in that way, it is a vice in the sense that that person, in the sense that that person needs to work towards enlightening themselves, right? Because whenever we speak about knowledge, in the Islamic tradition, knowledge is light, right? And the absence of knowledge is darkness. So this darkness that exists in somebody's soul needs to be remedied, and that's through the process of learning. But also not just through rote learning, but learning with practice. So if someone has been born with a particular difficulty in learning, which would be many of us. Many of us are in this situation, including the one speaking here as well. What do we need to do? We need to go through the process of learning and acting upon this knowledge, such that Allah will release us from this darkness and give us light in our hearts. So now we are speaking about this, the vice of deficiency with regards to clarity of mind, where someone has been created in that particular state, and through, we mentioned, through learning, someone can come out of that state. But the second part here, this is also very important as well, because someone can enter into a state of darkness in their heart through their own habits. لِتَعَوُّدِهِ بِذَلِكَ, right? What are examples of that? We've spoken about this before, right? In previous lessons, we have spoken about the difference between the ma'qulat, that which is intelligible, right, versus the mahsusat, that which is perceived. But what do we mean by perceived? That which is perceived through the senses. So we need to make that distinction between these two things. Why is that? Because a lot of media that is consumed today in the modern world, it's a lot to do with many of our senses, right? Whether it's visual media, whether it is media which is heard, whether it is media, maybe not media, whether it's nice foods that are tasted. These are all part of the sensible world, right? The world which is sensed through the senses, which is different than the world which is perceived through our minds, the world of the intelligibles. And the more someone spends in the world which is sensible, the more difficult it is for them to be able to think and spend in the world which is intelligible, right? The world of ideas, the world of essentially the world in which truth and falsehood is discussed is in the world of intelligibles, as opposed to the world of that which is sensible. So we don't want to get into a habit in our lives such that all we do is that we spend our lives consuming things which are in the sensible world, that which is in the world of the mahsul, whether it's television or whether it's we know all of the different means and ways that we can consume things in the sensible world. But we want to move away from that bit by bit, such that we spend time reflecting, right? We spend time thinking about what is true and what is real, because what makes the human different from the animal is that they have the capacity to think about universals, essentially to think about what is true and what is false. And true happiness, true contentment for the human can only be found in knowledge. But in what sense of knowledge? Certainty in the ultimate reality of things, which comes down to certainty about God, certainty about Allah, certainty about life in the next world, and acting upon that. If someone does not have certainty and is not acting upon that, then they are not fulfilling the human potential and will not be someone who will ultimately be happy. So we were speaking about the dhulma, or the darkness in one's heart or one's soul, which is a vice of deficiency. Now we have the vice of excess. So if the virtue in the middle, right, the virtue in the middle is light in one's heart, clarity of mind without confusion, and if the vice of deficiency is darkness, what is the vice of excess? He says here, وَطَرَفُ إِفْرَاطِهِ التهاب الذهن المتجاوز عن قدر المطلوب فيقع المطلوب دون مرماه وليس هذا في شيء من الإصابة إلى المطلوب كما زعم من لا خبرة له باستعمال الأفكار. Okay, so what's interesting is that the question here is, can someone be too intelligent? Right, that's an interesting question. Can someone be too intelligent? Well, it comes down to understanding what is meant by someone being too intelligent. So remember, going back to light, how we have the virtue of clarity of mind being light, and then you have the vice of deficiency being darkness. Well, the vice of excess is actually iltihab is like a flame which is just overburning. Right? It's a flame that is out of control. Right? So this is the visualization that we want to. So we have light, which shines upon what is false and reveals the truth. Then we have the absence of light, but then we have something which is then just burning out of control. That is that's kind of the image of the vice of excess, such that here. Okay, so if we imagine, right, if you imagine the correct conclusion, right, this is another simile being drawn out in the text. If we imagine the person as an archer, right, and truth as a target which needs to be struck by his or her arrow, well, the person, right, the person who has the vice of deficiency, their arrow does not even touch the target, right? They draw their bow and then they let go, but the arrow doesn't reach the target. The person with the virtue, right, which is in the middle, strikes the target. But the person which has the vice of excess draws back the bow and draws back the bow and lets go of the arrow, but the arrow just flies off past the target. So that's what's meant by the vice of excess when it comes to clarity of mind, where one's mind is, we could say, overactive, such that they do not actually think in the correct way, such that they may reach the proper conclusion. and this is and the final point here. What's interesting is that the commentator says this often happens with people who do not have much experience in using their intellect, right? So, and it's interesting because we'll come to this soon as well, that the human is actually created with sound intellect. But the human requires experience, requires practice, such that they can use their intellect in the right way. So this vice of overactivity of the intellect, this iltihab, this I guess this flame of the intellect which is burning more than what is desired, often happens with people who don't have much experience with using the intellect, which perhaps we can think about. We can always always point that finger to ourselves first, but we can also think about youth, perhaps those who are young or those who are new. We can see those who are people who have newly been acquainted with particular forms of knowledge. They might think, they might think that through that knowledge they know more than other people. Allahu alam. But once again, returning to the virtue, we have the virtue of clarity of mind. Now, moving on to the second precondition here, and once again, what are we doing? We're speaking about the vices of deficiency and the vices of excess for each one of these preconditions. So the second precondition of wisdom is good understanding, right? So basically, one's mind is making the correct movements, right? So we have the absence of confusion, and then in the absence of confusion, now the mind makes correct movements from the necessitating cause to the consequence. So what has been mentioned here regarding good understanding in terms of the vices? So it says here, once again, this here we are reading from the commentary of Tash Kubrizada. Let me find. So we have the vice of ifrat or excess, and then let me find the vice of deficiency. Okay. Okay, so we're speaking about the intellect making correct movements, right? We're speaking about the intellect making correct movements. So the vice of deficiency would be in the absence of those correct movements. Let's just read from the text here. Okay, so we have the virtue of jawdatul fahm, which is the mind or the intellect making correct movements from the necessitating cause to what is caused, right? So he says al-fahm min sha'niha al-intiqalu min shay'in ila al-akhar. Right? So we have something called understanding. And understanding in the human is where the mind moves from one thing to another. Right? Where the mind moves from one thing to another. And we mentioned an example. We used the example for mathematics. Someone hears, 5 plus 5, and then their mind immediately moves to 10. Right? So that's an example of fahm. That movement is an example of understanding. ولا تتخلف عنها هذا الأثر إلا بأن لا ينتقل أصلا أو بأن ينتقل لكن إلى ما لا انتقال إليه. So he says here that this aspect of understanding in the person either doesn't exist where it doesn't occur in two ways. Either the mind doesn't move at all, or it moves to where it shouldn't go to, right? I know. The language is a little bit strange. In English, we don't really speak about the mind moving, right? But what I mean by the mind moving is basically activity of the mind being active, right? The reason why I'm using the word move is because that's what's used in the Arabic. But the mind has, the intellect has activity, so it moves. It moves within the world of the intelligibles, as we mentioned earlier. So either the mind's activity, right? The mind doesn't move at all, or it essentially moves to where it shouldn't go to. And when does that happen? إما لانتفاء شرائطه كما في حالة الطفولية. And so when does the mind's activity, or when is the mind active in the incorrect way? Well, either it happens when, usually it happens during childhood, right? When someone is a child, you could say one's intellect is not fully developed, so this virtue of correct understanding is not there. Or, which is perhaps more applicable to adults now, لِوُجُودِ الْمَوَانِعِ, or in the presence of factors that stop this correct activity of mind to occur, كما في الغباوة العارضة, which is, for example, it's essentially what's called here stupidity, right? But once again, when we're speaking about stupidity, we want to remember we were speaking about stupidity which someone out of choice enters, right? Someone out of choice becomes stupid, right? How does that happen? We mentioned it earlier, right? Someone spends too much time in the world of the sensible, right? All they do is entertain themselves through all of the various modes of entertainment that exist in the world, and they don't spend their time, using their mind in ways which are beneficial for them. Okay, so someone can have, so basically, when does the mind not, when is the mind not active in the right way, or when does the mind not move in the right way? Childhood, right? Or stupidity, right? Obviously, this is a medieval text, so you probably, us thinking, as in we can probably think about other reasons why why humans might not be thinking in the right way, but we're sticking to the text, and we'll benefit from what we can benefit from here. Okay, so we'll continue, and he says here, لذلك فإن الفهم في الإنسان جبلي وإن خلافه لآفة. Right, so understanding, what do we mean by understanding or good understanding? The human's mind or intellect moving in the correct way is jibilli, is actually something natural in the human, and Allah creates the human in that way. وَإِنَّ خِلَافَهُ لَآفَةٌ, and the opposite of that is a vice. And where is the evidence to that? The evidence to that is in a very famous hadith from the Sahih al-Bukhari, in which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every person is born upon the fitrah, إِلَّا أَنَّ أَبَوَيْهِ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ وَيُنَصِّرَانِهِ وَيُمَجِّسَانِهِ, except that their parents are those who basically place him on the religion of the Jews or the Christians or the Magians, right? So every person is born on the fitrah, but their parents, right? So it's an external force. Something external places them on another path. So the author says here, okay, وهذه الفطرة وإن كانت فطرة الإسلام إلا أنها يفهم منها حال فطرة الفهم بطريق الإشارة لأنها مستلزمة لفطرة الفهم فافهم. Okay, so he says here, okay, but this hadith is actually speaking about fitratul Islam, right, the primordial state of the human to be attracted to Islam. So as this person grows up, you imagine the person who has no negative, uh, who has no external factors, they are guiding them away from Islam. This person will grow up and become a Muslim. This is what is meant here when we read the hadith. Every person is born upon the fitrah, right? They have this primordial nature, this state in them in which they will become, they will essentially affirm the ultimate truths, the ultimate realities, that Allah is one, that Allah is the creator of the universe, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. So this is the fitrah. Except that if their parents or society around them guides them to another way, these external factors. So that's what we mean by fitratul Islam. However, what were we speaking about earlier? We were speaking about understanding, good understanding being part of the fitrah. So what's the connection, right? The connection here is that fitratul Islam necessitates fitratul fahm, right? As in someone being attracted and essentially affirming as they grow older, naturally by their primordial disposition, the ultimate truths of reality, the ultimate truth of the existence and oneness of Allah and the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How does that happen? That happens through good understanding, right? So the fact that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that, a person primordially, naturally will be affirming these ultimate truths, then this necessitates what? This necessitates a tool within us that is able to do that for us, that we are able to utilize, which is given to us by Allah, such that we can reach those ultimate realities. And that's what we mean here by fitratul fahm. So Allah creates us with this inner disposition, this primordial nature, to be able to reach correct conclusions, for our mind to be active in the right way. And he continues and he says, وَأَعْلَمْ أَنَّ جَوْدَةَ الْفَهْمِ هِيَ الْوَسَطِ. Okay, so here, this is where he's going to speak about about good understanding and how it's a virtue, and we have the vices of excess, or the vices of deficiency and excess. Okay, so he says here, وَتَفْرِيطُهَا الْإِبْطَاءُ وَهِيَ أَنْ يَكُونَ تأخر الفهم وهي أن يكون تأخر الفهم ملكة لصاحبها، وإفراطها سرعة التخيل على سبيل الاختطاف بلا إتقان في الإيقان وإحكام في الأحكام. Okay, so it says here that the vice of deficiency is actually a slowness in understanding. Okay, وتفريطها الإبطاء وهي أن يكون تأخر الفهم ملكة لصاحبها. Right, so here the vice, the vice of correct understanding is a slowness. Okay, a slowness, and the vice of excess is a quickness, which is and we can say someone's thinking being overly quick. This is interesting. This is interesting because this would, Allahu A'lam, more be applicable to the third precondition of wisdom, But it's something to think about, right? Something that we can reflect on. So we have jawdatul faham. So the mind is making correct. The mind is making correct movement, right? But the vice of a deficiency is that it's doing it in a way which is too slow, and the vice of uh, so so the vice of excess is where it happens too quickly. على سبيل الاختطاف. So it's almost like someone is snatching something, right? And if you imagine, if you imagine ideas being snatched, right, then it's not being done in a way of full and complete understanding. If we once again, another simile struck by the ulama in terms of understanding is imagining the mind like wet, imagining the mind like moist dough, right? Imagining the mind like moist dough, and we have a coin, right? A coin, and the coin is being imprinted onto the dough, right? Now, the firmer one, or the firmer or clearer, or we can say a deeper, a reflection of deep understanding is where the coin has been firmly imprinted into the dough or the soft object, such that the picture is very clear, right? Such that the picture is very, very clear. This represents a deep understanding of that particular concept. But if you imagine someone's intellect is too quick, right, such that they're jumping from one idea to another idea, then you can imagine that coin being imprinted into the dough, right, is not that, you can say that imprint is not very strong, right? So that's an example of a vice of excess, such as someone is thinking in a way which is too quick, right? It's too quick, such that all they reach in terms of the understanding of a particular subject is that kind of surface imprint. So it's a very light imprint which very easily might disappear, as opposed to someone who takes the time, right, to reach to think and to reflect, such that that imprint in that dough or that soft object is very, very, very firm and very, very detailed. So once again, right, we're speaking about we have the vice of deficiency and the vice of excess of the virtue of good understanding. Now let's move on to the final one for this lesson. The third one, الثالثة الذكاء, right, which is quick-wittedness. So what is the vice of deficiency and the vice of excess of quick-wittedness? Let's read here from the same commentary. Okay, so here it says here وتفريطه البلادة إما المتناهية التي تكون عدم الانتقال من الملزوم إلى اللازم أو عدم الاستنتاج النتائج من شكل الأول ملكة له. Okay, so we have the vice of deficiency of quick-wittedness is stupidity, al-balada, and stupidity can occur in many different ways. One way is such that the brain doesn't even come to any conclusion, right? So when someone when someone thinks about, let's say, we'll take simple examples. So someone takes, for example, a simple maths, a simple point of arithmetic, right? 5 plus 5, their brain doesn't even reach 10, right? This is an absence of that movement completely. Another point here is that their mind does not reach a conclusion through a syllogism on the first form. Okay, so let me briefly mention what is meant by that. So we've spoken about this before. We've spoken about the syllogism, right? And the syllogism comes in many different forms. But the easiest form, which is closest to the mind of the human, right, is where, for example, someone says, the العالم متغير والكل متغير حادث فالعالم حادث. Right. So, for example, it says here, every the universe changes. Everything that changes has had a beginning. Therefore, the universe had a beginning. Right. This is actually a specific type of syllogism, and this is called the first form of syllogisms. And this first form is actually the clearest to the human mind. Another example which we took earlier was, let's say, Socrates is a man, every man is mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? So these sorts of reasonings is very, very clear to the human mind. But when we speak about a vice of deficiency, we're speaking about such that someone's mind doesn't even reach those conclusions. Okay. لكن المراد ليس البلادة الخلقية بل البلادة المكتسبة الحاصلة من عدم تثقيل الذهن بالرياضات الفكرية وهي بتسليط الفكر على المحاكمات في النسب الحكمية. Okay, so but once again he brings back the discussion. Whenever we're speaking about stupidity, right, we're always speaking about the stupidity which someone habituates themselves into, right? So whenever we're speaking about wisdom versus stupidity, we're always speaking about stupidity, which is what? Stupidity which is a result of someone living their life, right? Living their life in a particular way such that they aren't working their mind, right? They aren't exercising their mind. They aren't thinking about, they aren't reflecting about the nature of reality. Rather, they're busying themselves with other things. So that's whenever we're speaking about stupidity being the vice of deficiency of wisdom, and in this case here, quick-wittedness, we're speaking about that sort of stupidity. And then finally, we will speak about the vice of excess, right? The vice of excess of quick-wittedness, which is spoken about here. وَأَمَّا طَرَفُ الْإِفْرَاطِ فِي الذَّكَاءِ فَهُوَ الْخُبْثُ الَّذِي يُجَاوِزُ دَائِرَةَ الْحَقِّ. Right? So basically, the vice of excess in quick-wittedness is basically conclusions, right? Conclusions which are beyond he uses the term here, the circle of truth, right? And he brings up the point here where just because something is more doesn't mean it is good, right? We can because and we can think of many examples. Just because someone is talking a lot, just because someone is speaking a lot, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily more clever, necessarily reaching the correct conclusions. So this is what is meant here when we're speaking about the vice of excess in terms of quick-wittedness. And he brings up a amusing example. لأن الزيادة على التمام نقصان كالأصبع السادسة في اليد. Because an increase is not necessarily an increase over perfection is a deficiency, right? An increase over what is complete is a deficiency, such as a sixth finger in a hand, right? So just another example of how more isn't always better. And on the final point, وهذا حاصل قول الحكماء البلاهة أدنى إلى الخلاص من فطانة بطراء. So stupidity, or we can say simplicity, is closer to, as in it's easier to get rid of stupidity and simplicity than intelligence, which is cut off, right? As an intelligence in which someone is actually speaking about what is false, but believing that they are true. And we know about the difference between simple ignorance and compound ignorance, right? Simple ignorance being the fact that someone doesn't know and they know that they don't know, and all they have to do is learn what they don't know. But we have compound ignorance where someone doesn't know, right? But they think that they know. So that's further away from knowledge. Why? Because the person first has to learn that they don't know, and then learn what they need to know. So there's two steps in that. So that brings us to the end of this lesson today. Which, what did we do? What did we do? Sorry, we spoke about the three preconditions, the first three preconditions of wisdom, which were clarity of mind, good understanding, and quick-wittedness. And we spoke about the vices of deficiency, as well as the vice of the vices of excess. And inshallah, in the next lesson, we'll begin with the fourth precondition of wisdom, which is husnul tasawwur, which is excellence of intellection. So we'll end here. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Afwan.